The silent call for help. The message traveled through the void, silent, desperate, and almost forgotten. A weak distress signal, barely holding together, bounced between dead relay stations and abandoned satellites. It had been sent from a distant star system on the edge of known space, a system that no one cared about. For weeks, the signal went unanswered. The galactic nations ignored it. The mighty empires of the stars turned away. To them, it was just another doomed world, another civilization on the brink of extinction. It was not their concern. But then, the signal reached human space. On a hidden station orbiting Titan, a group of human operators monitored deep space transmissions. Most of the time, they intercepted nothing but routine messages, trade reports, military logs, and diplomatic chatter. But when the distress signal arrived, something was different. The message was weak, corrupted by time and distance, but one thing was clear. An entire world was begging for help. Lieutenant Sarah Carter leaned forward, adjusting the signal enhancer. The message was old, almost a month delayed, but it was still transmitting. The voice on the recording was barely audible, distorted and full of static. "Help us. They are here. Shadows in the sky." Then, only silence. Sarah glanced at her superior, Commander Reynolds. "Sir, we need to respond. Someone is out there, and they don't have much time." Reynolds exhaled, rubbing his chin. "Where is it coming from?" She ran the calculations. "Sector 12, the Velari system." Reynolds frowned. The Velari were a small, peaceful race. Not warriors, not a threat to anyone. If they were under attack, it wasn't a simple pirate raid. This was something worse. "The galactic governments ignored it, didn't they?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir." No known responses. Reynolds clenched his jaw. This wasn't the first time the wider galaxy had left a weaker race to die. The so-called great civilizations only cared about profit and power. If a world had nothing valuable, they abandoned it. But humans were different. Reynolds turned to his officers. "Get me fleet command. Now." Across human space, the signal was relayed up the chain of command. It reached the Terran Defense Council, the highest military authority in the Solar Federation. Generals and admirals gathered in a secure war room, their faces grim as they listened to the broken message. Admiral Kovacs, an older man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "This system is outside our borders. If we send warships, it will be seen as an act of aggression." Across the table, General Vasquez shrugged. "So what? The other species don't care." They didn't answer. "Are we just going to let an entire world burn?" "The Senate won't approve of full deployment," another officer said. Kovacs smiled coldly. "Then we don't ask them." Silence filled the room. Unofficially, he continued, "A fleet is conducting a routine training exercise near Sector 12. He looked at Vasquez. "If they happen to change course and respond to a distress call, well, that's just a coincidence, isn't it?" Vasquez grinned. A coincidence, indeed. The order was given. Within hours, a fleet was mobilizing. Warships that were meant to be on patrol were quietly rerouted. A human battle group, one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, prepared for war. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. At Luna Shipyard, the most advanced warships of humanity stood ready. The TNS Retribution, a massive dreadnought, led the fleet. Its hull was layered with reinforced armor, its weapons capable of tearing through entire armadas. Around it, cruisers and destroyers powered up their engines, their crews rushing to their stations. Fighters were loaded onto carriers, and weapon systems were checked and rechecked. On the command deck of the Retribution, Captain Elias Drake stood tall, his gaze locked on the main screen. He had seen countless battles, but something about this mission felt different. "Status report," he ordered. His second-in-command, Commander Lin, responded. "Fleet is at full readiness. Orders." Drake turned toward the main view screen. where the stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere, far beyond, a helpless world was waiting for salvation. He clenched his fist. We move out. Full burn. Engines roared to life. The fleet launched into the void, their path clear. Humanity was coming. Days passed as the fleet cut through space, traveling at speeds unimaginable to most. The crew worked tirelessly, running battle simulations, checking weapons, and preparing for the unknown. Then they reached the Velari system. The first sign of trouble came from the scanners. A vast energy signature loomed ahead. A hostile fleet was already there. But the enemy ships were not from any known faction. They were something new, something ancient. On board the Retribution, alarms blared. Multiple warships detected, Lin reported. And sir, they don't match any known design. Drake narrowed his eyes, put them on screen. The image appeared. Massive black ships, jagged and unnatural, hovered over the Velari homeworld. The planet below burned, its cities in ruins. Drake's jaw tightened. Open a channel. A moment later, a flickering hologram appeared. A Velari diplomat, weak and wounded, stared at them with wide eyes. Humans. The alien gasped. You actually came. Drake stepped forward. We received your call. Hold on, we're getting you out of there. The Velari's face twisted in fear. No, you don't understand. You need to leave. They are still here. Drake's blood ran cold. Who? The screen glitched, the transmission cut out. And then, the enemy fleet turned to face them. The human fleet hovered at the edge of the Velari system, their engines burning bright against the cold void of space. On board the TNS Retribution, Captain Elias Drake stood motionless, his eyes locked on the screen displaying the enemy ships. The Velari's warning echoed in his mind. You need to leave. They are still here. But the fleet wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. Status report, Drake commanded, his voice steady. Commander Lin's hands moved over the control panel. Enemy fleet consists of 24 capital ships, unknown design. No visible markings or insignias. Their hulls are absorbing most of our scanning attempts. Admiral Kovac's voice came through the comms from his own flagship, the TNS Vengeance. They're just sitting there. No hails. No response. Nothing. Drake's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Any sign of Velari survivors? Lin frowned. Scanners detect minimal life signs on the planet's surface. If there are survivors, they're scattered, underground, or in hiding. Drake's hands curled into fists. He knew the Velari weren't warriors. They were scholars, builders, peaceful. And yet their cities were burning. Their world was dying. And the enemy fleet was waiting. Send a broad-spectrum message, Drake ordered. Let's see if they respond. A few seconds later, his voice was transmitted across space. This is Captain Elias Drake of the Terran Federation. You have attacked a sovereign world. Identify yourselves and stand down immediately. The message echoed into the silence. No response. Kovac's voice came through the comms again. I don't like this, Drake. Something about them feels wrong. The feeling was mutual. The enemy ships didn't move, didn't react. They simply existed in the void, watching. Then, without warning, the screens flickered. The transmission systems went haywire, and an ear-piercing screech filled the comms. The crew recoiled as a shadowy figure appeared on the view screen. It wasn't a face. It wasn't even a form. It was darkness itself, shifting and writhing like living smoke. Two glowing red slits, eyes or something similar, stared through the transmission. A deep, inhuman voice rumbled through the bridge. You are too late. Then, every enemy ship moved at once. Alarms screamed as the enemy fleet surged forward, their black hulls cutting through space like hungry beasts. They're coming straight for us, Lin shouted. Drake's heart pounded. He had no idea who or what they were facing, but that didn't matter. Because now, humanity was in the fight. Battle stations, all ships, open fire. The void erupted in fire and light. The war had begun. The first barrage of human firepower tore through the void, a brilliant cascade of destruction. Plasma rounds and railgun slugs streaked toward the enemy fleet, each shot precise and deadly. But then, something impossible happened. The enemy ships didn't dodge. They didn't even attempt to shield themselves. They simply let the attack hit, and when the explosions cleared, they were untouched. Drake's stomach dropped. That's not possible. Admiral Kovacs cursed through the comms. They're absorbing the damage. It's like the Dan shots didn't even land. Before Drake could respond, the enemy retaliated. From their eerie black hulls, a wave of distorted energy pulsed outward, stretching across the battlefield like a hungry, invisible hand. The moment it touched the TNS Fury, the ship's engines flickered. Then, in a terrifying instant, the entire ship disintegrated, silently, effortlessly, like it had never existed. The bridge of the Retribution fell into stunned silence. Drake's voice was barely above a whisper. They just erased it. The enemy fleet advanced without pause. More pulses of their strange energy lashed out, warping space itself. Another Terran warship, the TNS Valkyrie, was caught in the field. The crew barely had time to scream before they were gone. A cold sweat ran down Lynn's face. "Sir, if we don't adapt fast, we're going to be wiped out." Drake clenched his fists. His mind raced. What the hell were they dealing with? Then, a small flicker of light appeared on the planet's surface. A signal. The Velari. Lynn pointed at the display. "We've got movement down there. Someone's sending out a beacon." Drake exhaled sharply. "Get me a direct link." The comms crackled. Then a voice, weak, strained, but alive, whispered through the speakers. "This is First Scholar Valen. We know what they are. You must not fight them head-on. If you do, you will all die." Drake's pulse pounded. "Then tell us how to stop them." Valen coughed. "There is a way, but we need time." Kovacs, still on the comms, growled. "Time is the one thing we don't have." Drake made his decision. They had to buy time. "All ships," he barked, "break formation, evade their fire. Do not engage directly. Focus on keeping their attention on us." The Terran fleet scattered, engines burning as they weaved through enemy fire. The enemy ships followed, relentless, unnatural, but predictable. And on the surface, hidden beneath the ruins of a shattered city, the Velari worked in desperation. The battle was far from over. But now, humanity had a plan. The Retribution shook violently as another wave of the enemy's strange energy pulsed across the battlefield. Systems flickered, warning sirens blared, and for a moment, Captain Drake thought the ship was about to be erased, just like the others. But then the energy faded, and the Retribution was still there. Lynn's hands flew across the controls. "Minimal damage. Looks like they can't erase us in one hit unless we're caught completely still." Drake exhaled, his mind racing. "Then we keep moving. Don't let them lock onto us." Outside, the fleet was struggling. The TNS Thunderchild barely managed to pull away from another enemy attack, its shields flickering under the strain. But the Terrans weren't just running anymore. They were stalling, buying time for the Velari on the surface to finish whatever they were working on. The comms crackled. First Scholar Valen's voice was strained but urgent. "We have almost completed the sequence, but you must hold them off a little longer." Drake gritted his teeth. Easier said than done. The enemy ships were relentless. They didn't move like normal fleets. No hesitation, no caution. It was as if they weren't piloted at all. Lynn suddenly pointed at the tactical display. "Sir, look at their formation." Drake's eyes narrowed. The enemy ships weren't reacting to their attacks. They weren't even adapting to the fleet's evasive maneuvers. It hit him. They're not thinking. They're following a pattern. Kovacs, still on the fleet-wide comms, barked. "What are you saying, Drake?" Drake's mind worked fast. "They're moving like an automated system. They're powerful, yes, but predictable. We can use that." He looked at Lynn. "Feed their movement patterns to the gunnery teams. I want precision strikes, right where they're going to be, not where they are." Lynn nodded, fingers flying over the controls. On it, across the battlefield, human warships adjusted. Instead of firing directly at the enemy, they aimed for where the ships were about to move. It worked. One of the enemy vessels lurched as a railgun slug punched through its hull. Instead of phasing through like before, the sudden shift in movement disrupted its strange energy field. It tore apart, vanishing into nothing. A cheer erupted on the bridge. Drake didn't smile. This was just the beginning. "We have a weakness," he said. "Now we exploit it." But even as the battle started to turn in humanity's favor, something changed. The enemy fleet stopped moving. Drake's breath caught in his throat. What the hell are they? Before he could finish, a massive distortion appeared at the center of their formation. Space itself twisted. Then, from the void, something colossal emerged. A ship, if it could even be called that. Darker than the abyss, larger than anything in the fleet, and radiating an overwhelming sense of wrongness. The Valari's desperate voice screamed through the comms. "No, it's too soon. We're not ready." Drake stared at the monstrous vessel. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The bridge of the Retribution fell silent as the monstrous ship fully emerged. It was like a wound in reality, a structure that defied logic. No visible thrusters, no discernible weapons, just a mass of shifting, jagged surfaces, pulsing with an eerie violet glow. It felt alive, as if the ship itself was watching them. Kovacs' voice crackled over the fleet-wide channel, his usual confidence shaken. "What the hell are we looking at?" No one had an answer. Then the void itself screamed. A low, guttural sound, like metal being twisted apart, like a dying star's last breath, ripped through every ship's comms. Crew members clutched their heads, eyes wide with pain. The lights on the Retribution flickered wildly, the system struggling to remain stable. Drake forced himself to focus. He turned to Lynn, his voice sharp. "Status report." Lynn winced, shaking off the lingering pain. "Our comms are compromised. Shields fluctuating, but still holding." Drake gritted his teeth. Whatever this thing was, it had just announced itself in the most terrifying way possible. Then it moved. Not with thrusters, not with any propulsion system that made sense. It simply shifted, as if space itself bent to its will. In an instant, it was no longer in the center of the enemy fleet. It was right in front of them. A deep, instinctual terror gripped Drake's chest. Every nerve in his body screamed to run, to turn the ship around and get the hell away. But he didn't, because they had no choice. The colossal vessel opened. Not in the way a human ship would, with hatches or hangar bays. The surface of the nightmare ship simply peeled apart, revealing a dark abyss inside. And from that abyss, something emerged. A beam of violet light erupted toward one of the Terran warships, the TNS Vanguard. The ship's shields flared, but it didn't matter. The beam passed through them like paper. For a moment, the Vanguard was still, perfectly intact. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. No explosion, no debris, just erased from existence. The bridge crew of the Retribution stared in horror. Kovacs' voice came through the comms, a raw whisper. "We just lost the Vanguard." Silence. Then, First Scholar Valent spoke, his voice urgent. "Captain Drake, you must hold. We are nearly ready." Drake exhaled sharply. "Then you better move fast, because whatever that thing is, it just made it clear." He locked eyes with Lynn, his expression grim. "It's not here to fight us." Lynn swallowed. "Then what is it here for?" Drake clenched his fists. To erase us all. A second beam of violet light sliced through the fleet. Another ship, TNS Resolute, vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. Panic spread through the remaining Terran warships. Admiral Kovac's voice rang across the comms, barely holding back the fear beneath his calm exterior. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Fire at will. The void erupted with energy. The Terran fleet unleashed everything. Railgun slugs, plasma torpedoes, antimatter warheads. Hundreds of projectiles and energy beams streaked toward the colossal enemy vessel. And then, they all vanished. Drake's heart hammered in his chest. The weapons simply blinked out of existence before they reached their target, as if they had never been fired at all. "This is impossible," Lynn whispered. "No ship should be able to do that." The violet glow from the nightmare ship's hull pulsed, brighter now. The eerie hum in the void grew deeper, vibrating through every Terran ship. Then, a new horror began. The Retribution's hull groaned, the metal twisting unnaturally. Panels ripped away, as if something unseen was tearing the ship apart from the inside. Drake grabbed onto his chair as the entire bridge shuddered. The air grew heavy, a crushing pressure weighing down on everyone. The crew struggled to breathe. Kovac's voice came through the comms, desperate now. "We're losing ships faster than we can react. If you have a plan, Drake, now's the time." Drake turned to First Scholar Valen. The alien's 3 eyes were wide with fear. "Tell me you have something," Drake shouted. Valen's voice was urgent. "We need 30 more seconds." Drake's fingers curled into fists. They didn't have 30 seconds. The nightmare ship's glow intensified. Another beam fired. This time, it was aimed directly at the Retribution. Drake shouted, but before he could react, a blinding white light erupted from the planet below. It engulfed the void, swallowing the violet energy. The hum of the enemy ship warped, distorting into a high-pitched screech. The monstrous vessel shuddered. For the first time, it reacted. Drake's breath caught. What the hell was that? Valen exhaled, his voice filled with relief. "The ancient weapon," he whispered. "It worked." Drake's eyes locked onto the enemy ship. The violet glow was flickering now. Its hull, once shifting and alive, looked weaker. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The enemy ship lurched as the ancient weapon's energy wrapped around it like chains. Its violet glow dimmed, pulsing erratically, as if struggling against an invisible force. On the Retribution's bridge, Drake stared in disbelief. A few seconds ago, they had been on the verge of annihilation. Now, the monstrous vessel was faltering. Kovac's voice crackled over the comms, breathless. "What the hell did you do?" Drake turned to Valen, who stood trembling, his 3 eyes locked on the screen. "It's not us," the alien scholar whispered. "The planet's defenses have awoken." Down below, the surface of the ancient world was glowing. Lines of golden energy spread like veins, pulsating with power. The enemy ship convulsed, its structure twisting unnaturally. Deep alien sounds rumbled through the void, a scream unlike anything the Terrans had ever heard. Then it tried to flee. The massive vessel's engines flared, burning brighter than a star, tearing through space as it attempted to escape the planet's grasp. But it was too late. A second blast of golden energy erupted from the surface, striking the enemy ship dead center. The monstrous craft froze mid-flight. Its entire structure quivered, the violet glow fading to nothing. The eerie hum that had haunted the void cut off abruptly. Then, with a final, agonized shudder, it collapsed inward. One moment, the ship was there. The next, it was gone, as if it had never existed. Silence filled the bridge of the Retribution. The crew stared at the screen, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Drake exhaled slowly. Did we just win?" Valen closed his eyes and nodded. The planet's weapons were designed to stop them. It worked. Relief washed over the fleet. Cheers erupted over the comms, a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. They had survived the impossible. Kovac's voice returned, steadier now. Retribution, you still in one piece. Drake smirked. Barely. The Admiral chuckled. Good. Because we're still in a war zone. And I don't think that was the last of them. Drake turned back to the screen, his expression hardening. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. And humanity had sent a message. They had answered the distress call. They had stood their ground. And when the monsters came to claim the stars, humanity had fought back.